Okay, here we are. This is Yoga Talks Podcast. My name is Jay Brown. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're returning, thank you. I'm wondering, those of you who are listening, if any of you feel like maybe the demands that are on you are starting to exceed the resources you have to meet them. I'm wondering if I'm the only one who feels like I'm just riding on the empty line. Normally I'd like to have a little bit more of a reserve in the tank, you know? I like to feel like I'm not all the way out there and that it could collapse. Not that I think that's going to happen, but oh man, my friends, right now, I am laying down and speaking to you, which is ridiculous. I've never done this before. I've never tried to record while I'm horizontal, but I'm recording horizontal tonight, not because I can't, just because I'm freaking tired and I feel better lying down. So I was like, well, why don't I just lie down to do this? So I'm very lounged right now. And today was just utterly taxing. It was a ridiculous day. My wife got called into work, so I was on daddy duty all day. Me and my 2.5-year-old. You know how I know that I'm out of sorts? When I feel resentful towards my 2.5-year-old because she's still using diapers. My first daughter, she got off the diapers really quick. She didn't want to use them anymore. My second daughter, though, she has used the potty. I've watched her use the potty, but she seems to know that me and my wife are really looking forward to her not using the diapers anymore. So she's choosing to use them just to spite us. And I was like pissed at her for it today, which is just ridiculous. Come on, man. She's 2.5 years old. You're supposed to be the adult. So I'm hoping that you guys got a little more reserve in your tank than me. I did clear some hurdles this week, though. If you were listening last week, didn't bail. And, you know, I wrote a blog post this week about the struggle of people like myself, and I think a lot of you who are listening who have looked to make our passion for yoga like a livelihood. And some of us have done that more or less degree, and just kind of how it's changed, how the game has changed, and the struggle of that, which is very much the theme of today's podcast with Sadia Bruce. I have to say, I didn't really know going into this conversation that it was going to be about that. I had no idea that Sadia was at this kind of crossroads and wasn't sure about being a yoga teacher anymore. I didn't know that. I had a whole other thing in mind. She posted something on Facebook timeline about me that I was upset about. We talk about it, and that's really why I was bringing her on. And I was a little bit nervous because I was kind of upset about the post, and I didn't know how the conversation was going to go. But when we actually got on and started talking, I don't know, it just went in a different direction, and I led it, and there were some unexpected things that came out that I thought were really important, and I really appreciate the way that Sadia had this conversation with me in such an honest and forthright manner, and it just made for something real. It was something real happened, and I'm excited for you guys to hear it today. Next week, I'm talking to Amber Carnes. She's like me. She's moving and working it, and so we had a good talk on a similar note, but from a different perspective. We'll listen to that next week. Before we listen to today's talk, let me say this might be your last chance, or it's soon to be your last chance, if you wanted to try to join me in Montana at the Feathered Pipe Ranch, June 17th through 24th. if that's not happening, I am going to be in Helsinki, Finland, August 23rd through 30th. I got a new thing happening that I need to tell everybody about. I'm excited about it. It's pretty cool. I will be soon offering a subscription to live stream classes with me. For the last 3-4 weeks, I have been beta testing a live stream whenever I'm like teaching a public class. And there's been I don't know, maybe 50 people. I think some of you are out there listening maybe who were beta testers for us to sort of figure out the back end and the technology. And I think we got it sorted out. I think we're going to be able to improve upon it as we go. But it's interesting. The main idea is that it is live. So there won't be archived classes that you log into and do again and again like Yoga Glow or whatever. You got to be there for class. That's the only time it's on. And what I like about it is what makes my class kind of different from day to day is not generally speaking like the program. Those of you who know me, I kind of have a set thing that I do. I have been mixing that up a lot more these days, but generally speaking, my class in terms of the sequence of asana that we do is not really that different. But I think what changes is some of the, subtlety and nuances and interactions that I might have or things that I might say, no different than this podcast. So it's kind of certain elements of what I'm doing with this podcast, but mixed with practice. So I don't know. I think it's pretty cool. I think I mentioned last week I was resistant to it. My producer was really diehard, and it's because he wants it. He's been taking the classes, just like with the video that we made. He made this DVD with me because he wanted to make it so he could practice to it. And we've put together this live stream subscription because that's what he wanted. So we're going to be, rolling it out, announcing it soon in the next couple weeks. This month is hairy to the max, but starting next month, it's going to become available. So you can stay tuned for that. Otherwise, I'm going to be holding it down here and moving. I got to move. The next 3 weeks is really, wow, I don't know. I'm hoping everything just times out and works out okay. I don't know. There's a lot that could go wrong. But what am I going to do? The best I can. That's what I'm going to do. Always, you can find all my stuff, the blog, the archives of this podcast, the video stuff I was mentioning. All of that can be found at jbrownyoga.com. Show some love to the podcast. Go to iTunes, write a review, give us some stars, or go to a blog or podcast page and make a direct donation. Really appreciate that. Thank you. And I think that's fine. I'll hit you up on the other side a little bit. And till then, let's listen to this talk that I had with Sadia Bruce.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Sadia.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. I gotcha.
Yeah. I actually haven't been on Skype in a while, so I'm a little taken aback by the new interface. It's what is this?
Oh, I know. They changed it up on you since you were last here.
Yeah.
I gotcha. Well, cool. How's it going, Sadia?
It's going pretty well, I'd say.
Yeah, did you have a morning already, or did you just still getting about your day?
Yeah, I mean, a little. I had a little bit of a morning, but pretty low key. So
Cool. Well, I'm happy to talk to you.
yeah, I'm happy to do it too. I'm terrified that I'll suddenly have nothing to say, but
No, I'm sure we have something to say to each other. I feel like, first of all, it's funny. We met
through like the Heart of Yoga folks, right?
Yeah.
And then you sort of been coming up on my Facebook feed. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, I wanted to like learn a little bit about you before we sat down and have this talk. And
Yeah.
I, I couldn't find out much about you. Like where's the Sadia Yoga website? Is there
It,
one? Did I miss it?
it used to exist. It doesn't right now.
I see
Uh,
you took it down.
what's that?
You took it down?
Yeah, yeah, I did. And I thought also about like removing my social media for a little bit. Um,
Why? What's that about? I'm curious.
I just keep vacillating between like giving myself to this thing and like extracting myself and getting as far
Mm.
away from it as possible. It's very strange. Like,
No, it's not. I talked to a buddy of mine named Zach who was in the yoga world with me back in the day and then left. He said this thing, it's been in my brain ever since. He said, I love yoga and hate everything about it.
yeah, yeah,
And that seems like what you're expressing.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. Well, maybe like we could get into that. Why it is that you're so vacillating on whether you want to like really go full. I mean, because you've been teaching. Like I looked around, you taught at Yoga People. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. I forgot about that place.
Well, because it's funny because I taught at Yoga People for like a lot
Oh,
of
that's
years.
funny.
Like I knew Wendy, the woman who owned that place,
Okay.
and I taught there for years and years before I opened my place. So I sort of popped up
Oh,
on
I
the
did not know that.
yeah. So when did you teach in Yoga People?
Oh, it was recent and it wasn't that long, maybe a year or so, but maybe a few years ago, something like that, a couple of years ago.
But it's kind of weird. Is it still there? Because like when I went
No,
to
I
go
think they
there,
closed
like
recently.
it now transfers over to Abaya Yoga.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like why would they have the Earl? Like I don't know, like yogapeople.com goes to Abaya now.
What?
Maybe she just bought up the Earl and had it
Yeah,
forwarded it.
yeah, maybe,
Ha!
maybe.
Wow.
Clever, very clever.
Yes. Wow. So okay, so you taught there not too long ago.
Yeah, yeah.
And all
Well,
right,
like,
so
I've been teaching for 4.5 years, something like that. So I'm a zygote still.
okay, well that's a good amount of time. That's not like 1 year even. That's 4 years. So
Yeah,
let's go back. When did you do your teacher training?
I did it. I think at the beginning, like the end of 2012 or beginning of 2013. I think it was at Yoga Works.
Okay. And how was that for you?
For me, I think I appreciated that it was such like it was so sterile and such a blank slate that
Hmm.
I was getting like this foundation of information that I knew that I would later have to build on or get deeper with or something. So that was cool.
But you were aware of that while you were doing it.
Yeah, and I was aware of it, when I decided that I would do their training.
Hmm. And had that been the place you were practicing at?
Not really. I think I only started practicing there after I signed up for their training.
Okay. Had you been practicing before that?
Yeah, I started practicing. I think the first time I did yoga was in 2001 when I was in college. I was depressed, looking for something to,
Yeah.
provide some kind of relief or,
And
lack
what was the
of
class like that you
curiosity.
went to in college? What kind of class was it?
I think it was a vinyasa class. It was at this place that's still open called Tranquil Space in DC. I
Okay.
went to college in DC.
Cool. And what did you study in college?
Psychology.
Oh, all right. All right. So you did you graduate?
I did not. I dropped out of college.
Hmm. I thought about it. I managed to squeak my way through.
I dropped out of college. Now my yoga exit plan, I'm going to go back to school and probably become like a nurse practitioner or
Ah,
something.
that's a tough road too, man. Just to know. I mean, that's
It
hard.
is a
That's
tough
hard
road.
work.
Yeah, I did read though that they are experiencing like a crazy shortage of
It's true.
nurses and nursing professors. So it'll be hard, but at least I'll have a job that pays me actual money that I can use.
Oh shit. Oh shit. All right. So okay. So you're practicing for a little while. You said for some years, and you started in college, and then like me, like you found like a bit of relief somewhere, and it was at yoga. And so when you got out of school, did you keep practicing?
I did. It was on and off. I didn't have a dedicated practice for a while, and then weirdly, and the irony of my having left school is that I worked for many years as like a test prep coach. So I was good at standardized tests. So I like
Mm.
for 8 years or so, I was a private tutor. My friend owned a company, and we would just teach kids one on one how to take these ridiculous tests.
The
So
SAT?
yeah,
Oh
SAT, all
shit, I
that.
hated
Even
that test,
oh
man.
yeah, it's terrible.
I did
It's
like
terrible.
that Kaplan course, but fuck. And I got like a 1100 on it, but it's so crazy that test.
It's really stupid. It truly is.
Okay, so you made some money doing that.
Yeah, and that was fun. But just the irony never escaped me that I was this college dropout. My students would go to like Harvard, and they would get into pretty decent schools, and they would get amazing scores, and that's largely because they were great students and they studied. But it's like
Yeah.
just found it so funny, and I
Hmm.
think like
Little
my
did they
and
know. Little did they know,
little did they know,
huh?
little did they know.
All right. Okay, so you're practicing intermittent throughout that though?
Yeah, and I had a friend from high school who opened a Bikram studio in my town that my hometown is where I was working, where I was tutoring. He opened a studio and I started going there, and that was interesting enough. It kept my attention for a little while.
It was work. You got to sweat and stuff. That feels good.
Yeah, I got to sweat. It was weird.
So you weren't that into it though. I mean, you did it, but you weren't that into it though, that Bikram class.
Uh, I think maybe I'm policing myself because I don't want to sound like, oh, I was like this Bikram fanatic, but there were times where I would go every single day and feel good about it, admittedly.
Okay, but you don't feel good about that now?
No, it's a bit embarrassing.
Is that because of what's happened to Bikram or
Because of what's happened in Bikram, because for me, that's not a practice that makes much sense. I'm
yeah.
sure it works well for other people, but it just felt kind of unsound and empty.
Hmm.
I didn't really like the social dynamic of the studio. It didn't work for me.
Hmm. All right, that's fair enough. You don't gotta feel bad about that. You did some Bikram practice. You're not the only one. All right, so your friend has the Bikram studio. You try that out. You're like, nah. And then what?
And then, geez, what happened? I was sort of living a bit of a hobo life for a while. I had tutored for many years. That was sort of, it had run its course. I was getting a little bored with it, although it was always interesting. There's always, new kids and, with teenagers every day is ridiculous. So that, it was challenging in that way. But I decided that I would quit and travel around for a while. So I spent time in Europe for like a few months. My parents, my mother's from the Philippines, my father's from Liberia, West Africa. So I went to those places. I spent some time there.
Mm. What was
Yeah,
that like?
that was intense. Like my time is always intense because, of course, it's this post-conflict place that has such an interesting energy. It's like the people are naturally just very jovial and bright and welcoming, but the recent history of the country has been so dark, and like that kind of dark thread is woven, in the fabric, day-to-day fabric. You can still feel it.
Mm. Wow,
Yeah,
that's a weird mix.
it is a weird mix. It's really, really weird.
All right. So I know for myself, like I did a little traveling around that age too, and it was pretty eye-opening because I never even thought of myself as American until like I
Yeah,
left America, and then you're like, oh fuck, I'm American.
yeah.
And so you were born and raised in America though, right?
Yeah, I was born and raised in America. My origin story couldn't be more American. My parents met in a shopping mall in New Jersey.
Boosh. How about that?
It's very like high pedigree.
But they didn't come from America. They were immigrants.
Right, yeah, my mother is a nurse. She finished nursing school, she came to work, and my dad, he came for college and graduate school, so they both ended up kind of staying for some time. My dad has since gone back to Liberia, but
All right.
he was in the States for 35 years or so.
Okay, well, so you go see the lands of your parents. And then you come back, and then what?
Then I came back. I decided on a whim that I would move to Brooklyn. I did that. I'm still in the same
Why?
apartment.
Why Brooklyn?
Uh, I think I had always wanted to, and also my town in New Jersey, Montclair. A lot of my childhood friends, their parents were from Brooklyn originally, so a lot of them sort of moved back or moved to Brooklyn after college or whatever. That it was just a thing people were doing for whatever reason.
Okay.
So I think, yeah, I think I also wanted to be in the energy of the city at the time.
Well, Brooklyn,
Now,
I mean,
not so much, but
I've been living in Brooklyn for a long time because for a long time it was a really vibrant place.
yeah,
In a way, it's sort of I just sort of rode the wave of Bohemia, from like Greenwich Village to the East Village to the Lower East Side to Brooklyn.
yeah.
So you decided to go to Brooklyn, and did you have like a plan, and did you have any work or just
Yeah, I got work. I was doing a bunch of freelance stuff, some writing. I got like this temporary office job. Always sort of hustling in that way and making life happen in
hmm
spite of whatever. Um, but I think, yeah, when I moved to Brooklyn was when I started practicing. I think maybe my first Brooklyn yoga class was probably at Yoga People, actually, now that I'm thinking about it.
All right. And I mean, so that was over at Brooklyn Heights, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so when was that again? Give me some years again. I'm trying to put us in a timeline.
Yeah, that was 2012.
And so you start practicing at Yoga People, and I remember Yoga People. Like Wendy, the owner of that place, she would try to like get some good teachers and then be pretty hands off. It wasn't like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there was like a whole bunch of control over the teachers or a whole lot of micromanaging going on there. At least when I was there.
Yeah, I think that was my observation too, and I appreciated it for that because it seemed, that the teachers sort of they had some kind of agency and they were independent of each other.
Yeah, and if you could find a teacher you liked, then you were good to go.
Yeah, yeah.
And did you have a teacher there that you kind of gravitated to in specific?
There was this Iyengar teacher, Rachel. I know she's still around, still teaching.
I know
You
Rachel.
Rachel? Yeah,
Yeah.
really
Wow.
appreciate it a lot.
Fantastic. That's so
Yeah.
cool. All right. That makes sense. She's a great teacher.
And then there were some vinyasa classes I would go to. I can't remember any of the teachers' names. I know Donna Lynn was one.
Okay.
And yeah, I don't remember any of the others.
Okay, so how does living in Brooklyn, fucking hustling to make it happen, and going to classes at Yoga People lead to you doing teacher training at Yoga Works?
Honestly, I wish I had an answer for that.
You don't have one,
It
huh?
wishes that I could rewind and perhaps reroute my entire.
Oh no, it sounds like I've caught you in a place where you're not feeling very good about your yoga teacher status.
I mean, it's just so strange, but I guess we'll get to that. But
Yeah.
I'm actually I don't know that there was any one push towards even considering a teacher training. I think some teachers at Yoga People, they had their own training, and a couple of them were telling me, oh, you should think about it, you should do it. And I thought, oh, well, I don't know. That's interesting, but it did plant a seed. I think that's when the seed was planted.
hmm But at some point you decided to do it. So how did that happen? Why?
Yeah, I think the seed was planted. I started to put my feelers out. I started to, do some research on the internet. I started to go to other studios, and I really thought, oh, maybe I should consider actually doing a training. I think I decided against theirs because I think in my mind at the time I was looking for a little bit more, some kind of rigor. I mean,
Well, I mean, I have to say, I think you might have made a good decision. I mean, I don't know what the training program was
right,
there when
yeah.
you were there, but I know that, I don't know, there wasn't a lot of consistency, let's say
Mm,
that. And there's different people who would lead it over time. And I guess they're
yeah,
not in business anymore, so we can't get in too much trouble. I don't know that Wendy ever
right,
listens to
yeah.
this or anything, but I just
But
remember at
yeah,
the time I taught there and I was like a popular teacher and I was sort of approached about participating and I declined because I just didn't feel like
mhm,
I could get
mhm.
on board because I don't know, I just didn't feel comfortable with it. So,
Right. Yeah. And I think, My interest in yoga, it started from when I was a child. I think I bought my father a yoga book. I was never, deeply into it. There was no obsession about it, but I think, the seeds were planted, and maybe by that time, uh, the seeds had been sown for some years, so I could sense on some level that it wasn't going to, I didn't know that it would be that beneficial for me.
And it's a sensible choice to do yoga works because, they're like a name and
Yeah, that's what it's like, getting a salad from like what's that place called? Like Just Salad or something. It's not peace food, but it's more healthy than McDonald's.
I gotcha. I mean, again, I could see it. Like if you were sort of also kind of thinking of it as, oh, this could lead to other things and possibilities, and you want to have that be like, you want to have your training come from a place that you feel is reputable.
Yeah, yeah, I think that was part of it too. Admittedly, it was like some sort of name. I knew that the name was recognized or something. And not that I had grand plans of being this yoga teacher. I don't think I did, although, I think maybe they developed in training or something, but I
Hmm.
didn't go into it thinking, that something magical would happen as a result. Maybe hoping on some level, but
All right. And so in the training, what happened for you there? Because at some point you did decide to start teaching. So why did that happen?
uh maybe I think just the act of teaching had always been fun for me because I had been tutoring for a while. I had taught some classes, and I started that when I was in college. So when I was 18 or 19, I had already had, experience being in front of a group of people and trying to convey this information that I happen to think is interesting. So it felt like this nice marriage for me of something that I was exploring, but it would also use the skill that I already had.
Hmm. And I mean, you mentioned like you were pretty well aware of what you were getting when you did that training. And it's funny because I'm looking at like I have almost no notes that I made to talk to you, but I have this one note that I made, and it's popped up when we're talking at this point. And it was actually like some blog that somebody wrote about a Yelp review that you did. And it was a Yelp review, I believe, is about Urban Outfitters.
Great.
And it says, I'm going to read it because I like it totally
Oh
jumped
my
out at
God.
me. It says, Jersey's only outpost of the copyright infringing, sweatshop fueling, vertigo inducing store is just like the others, only it's staffed by blasé hipsters with Jersey accents, a little oxymoronic if you ask me, and populated by Range Rover pushing parents who are genuinely as excited about the merchandise as their teenage daughters are.
Wow, I never thought this would come back to haunt me
No, I think it's like,
in a conversation with you,
I
Jay.
mean, I just, again, there's like very little about you on the internet, and this came by. But what
You think
I
so?
didn't mean to
I feel
like,
like there's so much, especially on Facebook. I post tons.
that's true. But you know what? I specifically didn't. I tried not to do Facebook. I don't like Facebook. But in any case, what I thought about it, the reason I just read it to you is because it just to me is an example of someone who has a pretty astute eye about kind of like social dynamics or power dynamics or our culture. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a very, biting and I think accurate probably assessment
Yeah,
of
yeah,
something.
and it's weird because right now hearing it, I'm feeling some type of guilt, and that's like a theme
Mm.
where I'm like riding this line of like, well, I sort of I want to be honest,
Yeah.
but also I don't know. It's sometimes that honesty I can deliver it in a way that is not that palatable to people.
Well, listen, I can appreciate it. I think I've done the same thing where in expressing myself over the years, sometimes I've done it in ways that was how to say less than tactful or would sometimes provoke responses that ended up being contrary to my like intention, you know?
Hmm.
So but some of that I think is okay too, because again, like we got to be able to speak freely and be willing to like make mistakes, I think.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. And then I think too, in this profession we've chosen for now, it's like there is pressure, of course, to present yourself as being, someone who is sort of above, like stark honesty or above expressing like realness or something that is sincere if it's not, bright or soft or
Like
something.
you've transcended to like another energy that doesn't have all of that in there or something.
Yeah, yeah. In some way, I can understand why people might have that idea because a lot of, like Mark, for example, he
Hmm.
says, you should be in conflict with nothing.
Mm.
He said this a couple of times. I've heard him
Yeah.
say, and I think about it, and I understand it to some degree, but I think too, it's like a function of time.
Mm.
And I'm still like I'm still in a place where it's just not. I'm going to be triggered by
No,
certain.
well, I've grappled with that very thing. There's that expression, it's like the old adage, no steps need to be taken, which I think is kind of communicating the same thing.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
struggled with it in my life because, like whatever, I just bought a house 2 days ago and I have to
Oh, really?
move, and it just like on some level you hear that you're like no steps need to be taken. It's like bullshit. There's all this stuff I got to do.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
how what do you mean no steps need to be taken? I got to make rent. You got to figure out, clearly there's lots of steps that need to be taken. But what I've kind of come to with that is that it's not really about like the stuff you do on a day to day, your like schedule. It's more like your mindset.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
like nothing needs to be done and there's nowhere that we need to get to. And now we're just going to continue dealing with all the same shit that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
So it's more like an overarching
Right.
sensibility
Right. Right.
than like some magical truth that's going to allow you to no longer suffer.
Right. Right.
But I get you. I hear you that it's rough. It's rough going. And until you can get yourself in a situation where you feel like you're sustaining in terms on any kind of financial level, it's going to be really hard to not feel conflict.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I get it's sort of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If those base needs aren't met, it's difficult to like, achieve that the peak point, which is being actualized. So I guess it's kind of like that.
Hmm. Okay, well, I also noticed that you did your training at Yoga Works with Chrissy Carter.
I did.
I know Chrissy.
Oh, you do?
We're old friends.
Yeah, she was a Mark student, I
She
think.
studied with Mark for a little time, and there was like one occasion I think we actually had a private lesson together, and I taught her like a couple of my tricks one
Oh,
time.
cool. That's funny.
Yeah, she's still out there doing her thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you graduated from where you finished your training at Yoga Works, did you start teaching at Yoga Works, or did you start teaching right away, or?
Did I start teaching right away? I think I did. I had taken on a few classes, I think. Um, Geez, I really should have. I wanted to write a timeline out so I wouldn't
That's all
be.
right. You don't got to know. I'm just kind of getting a sense of sort of what happened after your training, because I'm assuming that you kind of got into teaching and being a teacher.
Yeah, yeah, I think it did start pretty soon after training. I'm trying to think. I did take on a few classes, like some gym classes or whatever, and I'd known too that I would do another training, but
Uh-huh.
that didn't come until geez, that didn't come until like 2015. But in between leaving my 200 hour and doing the 300 hour, I lived in Hawaii for a short time. I taught there. That was fun.
Uh-huh.
Uh, yeah,
And so, all right, but wait a second. So you finish your 200-hour training, you're teaching some, you go to Hawaii for a while.
yeah.
You then decide to come back and do a 300-hour training. I mean, clearly you must have liked teaching if you wanted to do another training.
I know, Jay. Yeah, I suppose
I mean, you
that's
must have
probably
liked it on some level at some point, Sadia. Or you wouldn't have kept doing it or going and doing
no.
additional
I did.
training.
I did enjoy it. I did enjoy it, and it was still this thing where oh, I get to share this information about something that I'm studying for myself and deeply interested in with other people using the skill that I already had. So I was doing that, and it felt good. I kept reading, I kept trying to practice on my own, and it was just like this continual like practice, this study that I was doing. And I think, yeah, there's something about yoga.
Yeah, I mean, you must have got something from it, clearly. I mean,
Once you start, you can't stop.
yes, it's a beautiful thing. And it's like what I said, we love it, but then there's all these other parts about what's happening around it that sometimes make it not so wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think the thing that tethered me to it, or that has tethered me to it for a while, is I mean, it's kind of ridiculous as a teacher to hope that all of your students will be receptive and will take something away from you every time you teach them. But those moments when that does happen, it's like that's everything.
Yes, the nectar drips and it hits you, and you're like, yes, this is
Yeah,
why
and
I
it's
do this.
like,
This is why I
yeah,
do this.
and it's this level and this quality of connection that I have not found anywhere else, doing anything else.
Mm-hmm. Ah, yes, I know what you're speaking of. Okay, so you decided to do another training at Ishta Yoga, right?
I did.
So why Ishta?
I think a couple of teachers who were friends of mine had done it at Ishta. I
Mm-hmm.
also sort of like that it was so different than Yoga Works, which is not really a reason to choose something, but
Mm-hmm. No,
whatever,
it's a perfect.
contrast,
It's like a
texture.
counter to the other one that you did, because it's certainly not as like you said, sanitized, right? It has the Allen Finger Tantra speak, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And were you into that?
I was into this idea that we were able to, infuse this physical practice, and I appreciate the physicality of the practice a lot. I'm just a physical person. It's
Mm-hmm.
how I was made, I guess.
All
But
right.
I liked, that we were sort of digging a bit deeper, and
It was Tantra.
yeah, it was Tantra.
And was the decision to do a 300-hour training like just like another step in terms of advancing in like a career as a yoga teacher?
At that point, yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, because I think that makes sense. If you're out there
Mhm.
doing it for a little while, you want to continue to move forward in it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you sort of do the next thing. All right, so you do a 300-hour training at Ishta, and that goes okay. You learn some stuff that you didn't learn at Yoga Works.
Yeah, yeah, I did. I think for me, my class was quite small. Uh, Maybe there were 8 of us, and I was the ITA, the training assistant, so I'd take attendance and all these things and have these weird little responsibilities on the side.
Mm.
Um, but that training was difficult for me because it was a small group, and the knowledge, the interest, and like the depth of people's thinking, I guess, in terms of yoga was so varied
Mm-hmm.
and in such a small group. It's like if there were 20 of us, that would be fine and normal because there
Yep.
would be some sort of curve, but it
Mm.
was just like a little bit jarring.
Oh, well, I always say that about like any of those like intensive things, like if you go to like an Omega or like a Kripalu, and it's like a smaller kind of group, maybe like 8 to 15 people, whether or not that's going to be a good experience depends on who's in there.
Yeah.
And whether or not you guys can kind of groove and get together on things, and how I mean, I think even diverse people can get together and have good
Oh,
positive
yeah.
experiences together. But at the same time, in a teacher training, I could see what you mean. If people weren't kind of coming from a similar place to you or interested in the same things as you, there might be a lot of time spent that wasn't as relevant to you.
Yeah, yeah. And then for me, and this has always been my trouble just as a student in any class, it's like, I think people, I'm trying to look for the
No, go there because it's time. It's time for us to go there. I think I know where you're going. It's time for us to go there.
people just, the level of curiosity is like non-existent. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like they expect to be fed information. And then they ask questions that to me they're not ridiculous. There are no ridiculous questions, but it would always shock me that they hadn't thought about this thing they were asking about outside of class.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that sometimes, like, I've seen this, and I don't know where it's sometimes someone's asking a question more to try to show that they're smart than to actually learn?
That happened, but it was more people were genuinely asking questions that to me, I don't know. I just feel like at that point, a couple of them had taught a little bit, some not so much. They had just come out of their 200 hour, but there were questions that I think that they should have been asking when they started yoga to begin with. Like, why have you been doing this for so long, but you haven't satisfied your own natural curiosity? Do you have curiosity about this thing that you've devoted so much time and so much energy and money to?
Interesting. So you just didn't feel like there was a lot of like a depth to the inquiry.
Yeah. And nothing be like cerebral or complex. It's just like this spirit of like, gosh, like I want to know.
Because you wanted to know.
Yeah. And I always think about one of the cool things about the Yoga Works training was one of our manuals had articles, like old yoga journal articles, like from Donna Farhai, whom I'm obsessed with.
Great lady. After she came on the podcast, we've been like in contact. What a cool woman.
Oh my gosh. I've never studied with her, but I just read her stuff and it just like, it hits me. And when you interviewed her and you said she's like this mythical person for you, that's how she is for me still.
But you know what's so awesome? She's so super real. Like she like, I don't want to go into it, but like we've had some personal exchanges together since where she's just been super helpful and supportive of me. It's really awesome. She's a great lady.
Yeah, and I like her realness as well. Her book, that Living Your Yoga, is like, I pick up that thing, I open it to a random page almost every day just to take it in.
It's like your Tao Te Ching, huh?
It is. It really is. It really is.
That's awesome. All right. So you muddled through your 300 hour with a group of people that didn't feel like they were challenging you as much as you might like to be challenged.
Yeah, and I think that was a function of, the different experiences. I know we had someone in training who, and I hesitate to like give particulars, but it's just, there are some people in training who had only started doing yoga like a couple years prior or something. Yeah. So it's like in such a wide range within such a small group of people. Difficult to like keep it together and find that rhythm.
All right. So you finished that in 2015, you said, right? That's not that long ago. That's just a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Well, what's been happening since then?
Teaching.
Yeah. I saw you teach at this place called Align, Brooklyn. What's that place like?
That place is great. That place is in South Slope. It's on 5th Avenue, 5th and 16th. It's owned by a husband and wife. The husband is a chiropractor. He's got his practice in there. But it's not a yoga studio proper. They've got plenty of other classes. They do have the yoga wall in there, which is great. They have some people teaching wall classes, but they offer like a range of experiences for people, but they're very into like, delivering like sound physical practices. They develop a community. The community there is really sweet. So that's been nice.
Cool. Well, it's funny, Sadia, just before when I said, I think I know where you're going, you didn't go where I thought you were going to go.
Yeah, I think I policed myself.
Ah, you did?
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Because look, here's the thing. Like, If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.